All right, we're ready. Hello, and thank you for joining the first book chat of the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast No Guilt Book Club, where we are reading Reimagining the Mathematics Classroom. I got my book right here, ready to go, by Cathery, Mark Ellis, and Carolee Hurtado. Today, we are going to discuss the introduction in Chapter 1, the physical and virtual environment, and Chapter 2, the Discourse Rich environment. My name is Joel Amidon, and I am joined by my Teaching Math Teaching Podcast co-host Ava Thanheiser, and lucky us, the book's authors, Cathery, Mark, and Carolee. This is great. So thank you all for being willing to join us this evening. Maybe we can go around and do some quick introductions, and maybe Ava, would you be willing to start?
Sure. My name's Ava Thanheiser, and I'm in the math department at Portland State University. And I just started reading this book, and I'm thrilled. Let's maybe go by author list. Cathery, you want to go next?
Hi, all. Cathery. I'm in teacher education at Chapman University, and a deep, deep fan of Ava, Joel, and Dusty.
Mark, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, Mark Ellis. I'm at Cal State Fullerton in Southern California, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share some of the thinking behind the book, and love that the book is still in wide use. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with you all.
All right, Carolee.
Hi, good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Carolee Hurtado. I am in teacher education at Cal State Channel Islands. Prior to that, was at UCLA with the UCLA Math Project and UCLA Parent Project. And thank you so much for having us today.
So this is pretty cool. So the idea for the No Guilt Book Club.
Joel, will you introduce yourself as well?
Thank you, Ava. I'm Joel Amidon, and I'm at the University of Mississippi in the Department of Teacher Education, and just humbled by the experience of being able to do this sort of stuff. And so it's kind of giddy here. So Ava and I had the idea for the No Guilt Book Club. We kind of had some fun this summer doing some book clubs where people couldn't really go anywhere. So we got a chance to do Mandy Jansen's book about rough draft math. And I saw Mandy said hi in the stream. So thank you, Mandy, for joining us. Yeah. And then we also did the high school math lessons I've got it up here on the shelf, to explore, understand, and respond to social injustice. And that was another one that we got to do over the summer, which was exciting. And so wanted to do it again during this, just to be honest, my semester ended at Thanksgiving and grades are in. And so I thought, hey, why not do something in between? But didn't want to put pressure on folks. But Ava wanted to read the book. And so, hey, we thought, let's go for it. Let's read it. And we said something to Cathery and said, hey, do you think this could be something? And we figured it out. So here we are. This is great. So my first question is just give us a little background on how the book came to be. I don't know if anybody wants to take that question before we jump into really the end of the content.
I can take that. I was approached by NCTM actually around a book proposal around looking at classrooms as learning environments. So there were a lot of books out that looked at discourse or looked at curriculum, but something that looked at it comprehensively, that looking at systems, that classroom is a system. It's not just one, but how things come together. And when I was approached, I said, I want to work with people who are way smarter than I am and know much more than me. So then I approached Mark and Carolee, because these two individuals are so deeply grounded in schools and in teachers and communities. And as a collective hope, our goal was to center on teachers. So you'll notice the book centers on teachers throughout. In every chapter, we highlight, this is really, I would say it's a dedication to teachers and students and how brilliant they are. And then we added a few things of where technology is not a separate chapter, but it's embedded throughout. And that we asked for a separate chapter on families and communities, because we felt that was central to looking at learning environments.
Awesome. That's great. Anybody else want to add anything else to that description? But that's pretty good.
I'll just say that Cathery is always quite generous in her comments. She's the one who led the team here in motivating the project and really moving it along. And absolutely, you know, Carolee and I totally agreed with her, but saying from the beginning, this has to be grounded in what's going on in classrooms, right? I mean, of course, there's lots of research that's important for us to draw upon. But if it's not connected to what is really happening in classrooms, you have it grounded in practice, it's not going to come across as authentic and relevant. So I appreciate Cathery's passion around that and the invitation to join her in this journey. She found two folks who are as crazy as she is about this work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I really, oh, go ahead, Carolee.
I just wanted to add too that I really want to honor the teachers and educators and families that we worked with, because we had the fortunate opportunity to meet weekly, Cathery, Mark, and I, but really it was being in classrooms for about 3 years and being able to document and highlight some really awesome things that we could share, you know, with the readers.
No, I thought that was what I was just going to echo, like the one, hearing the teachers, seeing all the teachers work so far that, you know, had it in the book that we've read so far, and just seeing how some of the parallels with the high school math lesson book that we read over the summer too, and just like that the teachers are at the forefront, you know, offering some framework, but then putting the teachers' work to say, hey, here's what this looks like. I just love that part of the book. I don't know, Ava, did you have anything to offer before I was going to jump into a question. I don't know if you had something that you wanted to go.
I do just want to add something to that, you know, sort of the background of the book. From what I understand, it came from NCTM's publication committee and a desire to, as Cathery said, have something that focused on the learning environment. But that, you know, goes way back. We're standing on the shoulders of folks from a generation ago who had the foresight to start publishing standards for the teaching of mathematics. So it actually goes all the way back to the professional standards for teaching mathematics document from 1991, the year that I was getting my teaching credential, is when that came out. And there's a whole section in there about discourse. There's a whole chapter about learning environment. So it really was sort of drawing on the strengths of NCTM and its mission to advance the teaching of mathematics in a way that serves all students and helps to create more inclusive learning environments.
And I also want to build that, just like how we talked about, one of the tenets of the book is around creating powerful learning communities, that we are smarter and stronger together. This book, we didn't create new research, we built upon existing research, and particularly scholars of color who were challenging this idea that certain students should have different types of learning spaces. So we were really intentional about capturing classrooms that are bilingual classrooms, like Luffy Lin in the audience, who teaches in bilingual settings. And the work of Mandy Jansen that talks about rough draft thinking and that all children are brilliant, and that these type of teaching should take place in urban, suburban, rural, with students of color, students with disabilities, students who are emerging bilinguals, all has assets. But we're building on the work of folks who in the field of math education had to fight for this, fight for its centrality. And now it's no longer less controversial, but it's so much of their work that allows us to really highlight that.
Yeah, so I was talking to somebody about this book, like, and just saying, hey, have you read this book or heard it? Like, and then just like, you know, it's like orange juice concentrate, like everything, like there's so much packed within it, like that. It's, I mean, you know, it's so digestible. Like, you know, this would be good for our teacher candidates. This would be good for handout with professional development. Like, I mean, just excited for the chance to go through it, because there is just, like you said, there's so much in it that you're leaning on with regards to the research that's going on beforehand. And I guess I want to jump into the introduction, if that's okay, to talk about those principles. Like, how did those principles that you discuss in the introduction, and I could read them off real quick, is the teach toward the understanding of powerful mathematics, view students as sense makers with valuable, important ideas, and nurture a mathematics community of learners. And so you talked about those as central to creating productive, inclusive mathematics learning environments. Like, so how did those come to be?
I'll say we started with a much longer list. And one of Cathery's mantras is people will remember 3. So we had very, very rich spirited discussions about how to take this big list of ideas that we all felt were really, really important and condense it into 3 big concepts that resonated with all of us and captured, a lot of these other smaller ideas. So it was a very collaborative and I guess somewhat I don't want to say contentious. It was kind of fun, but we had some back and forth about it, right? And we would take things and test it with some of the teachers we work with. What do you think of these 3 principles? Does this resonate with you? So it didn't happen in an instant, but it sort of evolved over time as we started to dive into the writing of the book and spending time in classrooms intentionally, knowing that we were on this journey.
And it also builds from this idea that this book takes a systems lens, that who our students are and who they get to be as mathematics thinkers and learners. This idea that ability is not innate. It's not that some people are smart in math and others are not, but that it's situated in an environment. But it's not that teachers give that smartness to kids. It's in a relationship. So you'll notice if you look at the 3, we work towards powerful mathematics. Right? Like math is powerful. It carries so much power and it can do so much good and harm. And then the second and third, that second is every child is mathematically capable and brilliant, and that learning is collective. So it's really this idea that children already come in with a lot, and it's enhanced, or we can also hurt our students based on the environment. So it's this idea of a relationship. It's a synergy. It's an ecology.
So I want to follow up here. I have one big question for each of the 3 chapters. And my big question for the introduction is, what is powerful mathematics?
I talk a lot, so I didn't want to go first. So I'm not going to go first.
We're all practicing wait time.
Go, Mark. Go for it.
No, I'll just toss out at the beginning. I mean, I think it's the idea that there are ideas within mathematics that are unifying, that help to see coherence, that help to make sense. That in traditional 20th century math classrooms, that often wasn't the case, right? Students were given superficial knowledge of procedures and told to mimic what a textbook or a teacher did. And that was disempowering, right? So teaching toward powerful mathematics is the idea that the mathematics empowers the student. The student feels some ownership over that and can then use mathematics in their own lives to analyze, to make sense of situations, to make arguments of a quantitative nature. So it's that notion that mathematics as a discipline has these big ideas, and those should be accessible to our students. That should drive the way we organize our content goals.
So I have follow-up questions, but I wanted to give enough time for people to respond. Carolee, did you unmute yourself? Go ahead.
I did. I just wanted to add to what Mark said, is that I think so often math is done to kids and not with kids or for kids. And, I include families and communities in that too, that instead of math being this oppressive thing that we place on students, we can see math in very connected and relevant, authentic ways that we can use that to think about the world around us in ways that aren't just tied to page 83 in chapter 3.
And then when we talked about powerful mathematics, we talked about how math in the classroom should build on kids. It makes me think of Ricardo Martinez, and in a recent talk with him, he talked about how we often treat math and the individual as if they're separate. And he argues, we were trying to do the same as well, that math is a part of us. You know, we write explicitly that children come into the classroom with already rich ways of mathematics that's a part of them. It's embodied in what they do on a daily basis. And it should not be treated as two separate things, but math is a part of us and we are a part of math.
Yeah, it makes me think of, like, I don't know, just having, I have some younger, well, I have one younger kid, they're growing up fast. Anyway, just like talking with him and in the classrooms when I used to be able to go into classrooms pre-COVID, and like when you get a chance to give like a really good problem, right? You know, and so I see Courtney Kessler is made a comment. So just having a chance to think about the open-ended problems that she would give and just using those as sort of examples. But given my kids a problem, or given one of the students in their classrooms a problem, and being like, well, how did you solve it? Like, wait, you're not telling me like this, I have to drive down this path. Like I can, because I've got a pretty cool path over here that I could, you know, and like, it's like giving, you know, we don't want to use the word empower because kids have power and I think it just gets taken away from them. Like, but if it's like, I have this ability to go over here and I want to share with you this really creative way that I can solve this problem. And it's like, wait, let me understand how you make it. And like, oh, that's pretty cool. And like, it's like you just given them this, the world just opens up like, wait, it's not cheating. I can do these other ways that make sense to me. And it's like, if it's like, it's amazing to see the kinds of things that kids can come up with if we just allow them to, if we create the kind of environments that you're talking about where, you know, the who they are as math people gets to come out and be valued within the classroom. And that's, I love the things that you're doing in here to like say like, hey, that's what we want. That you express yourself mathematically. This is awesome. So the did you have another, Ava, you said you had a follow-up question. Did you want to get to that?
I do. I could probably talk for 2 hours just about this topic. So just because, you know, we mentioned page numbers, I'm on page Roman 9. No, I'm just kidding in the introduction. But after where you did principle 1, teach toward the understanding of powerful mathematics, I wrote down sense-making, coherence, purpose, pleasure. Is that what you mean by powerful? And it seems from your answer that that is what you mean by powerful mathematics, is that it's mostly, to me, sense-making and coherence go together, right? When it makes then it's kind of coherence. I'm asking because sometimes I was thinking that if I think about using the term powerful mathematics, somebody could think about, oh, those kinds of mathematics are powerful and that's the thing we want to do. But that's not what you meant. What you meant was whatever math they're doing it in a way that gives them power, understanding, and those kinds of things. That's not a question, that's a comment. But I see Mark nodding, so.
Some words that I would add to that is humanizing and bringing joy to the math classroom. You know, I think those things are so often overlooked, and you know, those are the things that I notice in going into classrooms where kids are excited to be a part of math class, and they know that they have these ideas and these cool paths, like Joel was talking about. And how do we learn to listen to students and be able to build on what they know to help them get even better, you know, in their thinking, so that they can share that with others.
And I also want to build on that. I think a lot about how this book would be relevant right now. And I think about how this is the time really to reimagine math. Our kids don't have textbooks and they shouldn't have to be working on that. So how can we use the things in their daily life, the things in their household to engage in mathematics, so that it really does build upon the rich ways of knowing in their households, right? Instead of doing those fraction problems, can we take out our measuring cups, our stick of butter, or a Post-it and say, what happens if I fold my Post-it in half? How about I fold that half and a half? What would happen there, right? Like, how can we really think about building on what's available and our resources right now, given the situation we're in right now.
I guess I go like, have you all seen any powerful examples of maybe how people are reimagining math just given their current circumstances? I don't know. Do we have any examples out there that people want to share?
I have tons, I have to say. I hang out in class because I teach only graduate students. So then I get to hang out in classrooms a day. So it's all virtual. And I also oversee my students when they're in student teaching sites online. Or I think of Luffy Lin, who's with us right now, who's one of my grads. And I've seen him teach. Watching him teach with his students, even in an online setting, they have roles. They're letting each other in, they're monitoring each other's chats, just like a classroom setting. And he starts his morning with a visual image of something in the world around them and has them do a notice and wonder which ones doesn't belong. And already starts with these conversations, and he's a bilingual teacher. And he does this all online, building from pictures and experiences and things around them, and still creating a community of learners where there's multiple entry points and multiple paths to follow. And I also see teachers when they're doing mathematics, and most of my teachers are in settings where Wi-Fi can be challenging and it's hard to speak out. With children, they use their hands. I might flash you an image, a real life image of something in my household. Show me with your fingers how many you see, so that they're starting to build on the resource, because a lot of times it's hard to engage in verbal communication because of the internet. Or it might be, we're talking about half. Can you run and now find something in your household that would represent half or a fourth? So I'm seeing all these things out there right now, learning from these amazing teachers who are innovating and really reimagining math.
Yeah, I saw that same example like last spring when we were, forced to go online, and like all of a sudden my, 8-year-old just goes tearing away, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" I gotta find 7. Like, I'll be right back. Like what? Like, and just trying to come up with creative ways to come up with 7. He wanted something he could eat, so that was good. But hey, awesome. So I, just thinking about time-wise, maybe we should jump into the next chapter, and unless anyone else had anything they wanted to make sure we pointed out with the introduction. And also I can see comments from Facebook, and I think I saw some from YouTube as well. So if you have a comment out there or a question that you want to, or a question you want to share, we can go for it. And so thank you for viewing live. We appreciate it. So the physical and virtual learning environment, I really, I loved how you, like right away, let's address this piece. Like what does a classroom space look like to facilitate the kinds of interactions and to actually live up to these principles that you put out there? And the thing that I would see or immediately, that virtual environment, and like wondering, like what would you see as adding to that given our current circumstances? But maybe that's something to hold off for a bit. But why start here? I guess my question.
Cathery came to one of our meetings and shared with us one of the principles that we work with, her comment. And she said that within a minute of going into a classroom, she could tell the kind of learning experience and environment that was created with and for the students. And, that really stood out to me tremendously. And I know when I'm working with teachers and with pre-service teachers as well, I really try to get them to think about what are their norms for doing mathematics, building on the intentional talkbook. And then how do you create that classroom environment so that you can enact the norms and have the kind of learning experiences ready for the students.
I think of Mark and I in another writing piece, and Ava knows well, and Joel does too, around Hogan's work. The UBIC community talks about how mathematics is not a noun, it's a verb. It's something that is Like there's no one word for math, because math is something we do that's situated in time and place. Right? So we started with a physical chapter because math is not something in here, but it's situated in how we provide the environment. So where tools are located, where can we find these tools? How is it accessible? How do we set up our classroom tables and seats so that student can work individually, that they have a sense of agency, and they can work collaboratively? All those things embody what it means to do math. So that had to be first. I think some of my curiosities, and I would love even for those to comment online and in these spaces, how does that transfer over to an online space? We talked about having a...
Hey, you're stealing my question, Cathery.
Nice.
Do you like I'm throwing it out to teachers? Because the book was framed around how they knew all of it, right? We just had to document it. So
that's right.
I think it's right. I think we talked about the power of math walls. Like I always talk about children's thinking needs to be documented and honored and thrown up on the wall so people can see it and reference it. I wonder, what does that mean on an online setting? How do we provide individual and collective spaces online? Love to learn from the comments and audience as well, as we all think about this too, right?
Well, I know one thing that and this is from, we had a great opportunity to interact with Jen Wolf in the Teaching Math Teaching podcast. I brought her on my own podcast too. And she was accumulating some resources for how do we going to teach going forward. And just like some of those things that you're saying, of how to just use Google Slides and sharing it with folks and thinking about how can it be a space where they can work and do things and do even complex instruction like tasks, but to represent their own things, and like how a Google slide could be the word wall for that, and that everyone has editing access, that be a way to document those sorts of things that we're coming up with. It was pretty powerful just to see some of those things. And then that kind of opens it up and think, well, what else could we do? What are other things? And again, that's excited to see if somebody does have some comments or things to share in the chat too. But that was interesting. And I just loved when you talked about the idea of can you see something from the first minute or so we're walking into a physical classroom, and even just seeing some of the things that you put in, where are the materials that are available for students. And like you said, Cathery, it's a verb, right? Math is something that you do. And so if the things that they need, that these doers of mathematics need to do it is up on a high shelf, well, then who are we actually positioning them as doers? Or where's the word wall? Is the word wall at the teacher's eye level, at the student's eye level? That's just such a powerful little thing, but that means a lot. What are we positioning? Who are we positioning our students as, right? And so just see, we've got some people have said something about Google Slides as being a powerful tool. A lot of people are recognizing Google Slides has had some powerful uses for them. But sorry, I went on 3 different tangents there. So I don't know if anybody wanted to comment on that.
One of the things that I have found powerful in the online setting, and my question was too, initially my question was, as a college instructor where I don't have my own classroom, how do I use some of the things from this chapter to make that classroom my own? But I think the online one is more relevant. And I was wondering, Cathery, if you could share a little bit about the resources slides you put together, because using those for my students in Google, and that has been pretty powerful in terms of availability.
So Ava sits with me in my classes. I have her Bitmoji, as well as Courtney's and a few other colleagues, because just like with children, we learn together. We also, with other many who are in the comment as well, we learn together. So I had put together, from gathering from resources of others, Bitmoji classrooms where the walls, you can click on it, you can have access to resources and tools. I'll make sure I share that on the Facebook page, where it takes you on to different tasks, different virtual manipulatives, and different things that's available, even having posters that we know are important to have up. The Standards for Mathematical Practice. I have women of color that are scientists up on my wall, on my Bitmoji Classroom, and also the norms and rules around making mistakes and taking risks. So those are things that and my students have all created their own as well. So I'll make sure I share that out there. We have virtual classrooms with manipulatives for elementary and secondary classrooms.
That's awesome.
Ava, I want to go back to your question of in person. I think sometimes people look at me really crazy at my university because I usually have a wagon behind me with a bunch of things.
Awesome.
Every time. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to teach my math methods course when we don't have all of these things? So, I reached out to my dean and I was like, okay, we got to put together some math kits. So we got the special permission to, have these bags that I will say that almost 100% of our students came and picked up. If not, we mailed it to them, because I was like, how do we create that space so that even though our teacher candidates are in a virtual setting and they have to learn how to teach in a virtual setting, how can we bring those tangible, hands-on kinds of things and the environment we're trying to create into what we don't have control over right now?
I was laughing when you were saying that, Carolee. I was just picturing doing that myself, and also we have done the same thing. We bought little carts for our student teachers and manipulatives and kits that they can take with them, because sometimes at their placement, certainly now it's all virtual, but when they're at a school site, sometimes they have to move from room to room as well. So we want them to be able to do that. I also was remembering my dear colleague, LaTrenda Knighton, who is a fabulous elementary educator from Louisiana. And when she's at NCTM, you see her with a suitcase. That is not her 50 changes of clothes. That is a whole suitcase of hands-on materials, because she's a K1 guru. And she cannot leave home without that. So I think that's just, you just own it, just embrace that.
The rolling suitcase can definitely be your friend. I have one that looks like a ladybug.
And I want to always highlight and call out some of the teachers who's in the chat that I think people should follow, like Michelle Lowe, Janecki, Shelby, Jordan, Molly, Janessa Saxton. If you follow them on Twitter, these are individuals who are engaging in creating rich learning environments and doing counting collections, curl counting, documenting student thinking and sharing it in ways publicly on Twitter so that we can learn from them. So I want to call out these names so that you all start following these people, because part of Reimagining the Math Classroom is for us to continue to have these opportunities to learn from each other. They share out some amazing things. I'm so impressed by them.
That can be the virtual coffee shop, right?
That's
where
right.
we all get together and follow.
What's
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm wondering, Cathery, if when you put your slides up, if you could also potentially put up a list of people we could follow that attended, or so. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and that's what I see with Janecki and Bridget talking about Google Slides and talking about using it as a place where students can look at each other's thinking, and so to advance things, and then that talk about learning together, and then connecting that to Mandy Jansen talking about rough draft math. Like those sorts of ideas are just building on each other, and like that we can again use each other and kids using each other in order to help each other with their thinking and advancing their problems. It's like it's cool stuff, the way that people are using those environments. And yeah, giving out opportunities to follow them on Twitter and see what people are sharing. We need our virtual coffee shops. So anything else from chapter 1 that was people wanted to highlight, or anything in the chat? I'm looking here, seeing if anybody had any questions. Otherwise, we can move along. just simple things like the clear paths and easy access to think, like, how are we, again, setting up the physical environment, making sure it is user friendly for children to access and find spaces where they can work. Just like, I don't know, I'm here working in this small closet. This is where my happy place right here, where I do a lot of good work. And so I probably wouldn't have thought of this is where I need to work, but like kids like, hey, I'd rather be with a clipboard on the floor next to the wall. And that's where I work the best. And like, we would think like, why wouldn't everybody want to just sit in a nice desk? Like, well, no, that kid wants to sit on the floor. So that's all good. But anything else for chapter 1? Sorry, Mark, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just, on that note, I think, just keep in mind, like, math can be an intimidating subject for some students. And if they've been in previous math classrooms and had, unfortunately, negative experiences, they're going to come in with that anticipation. And so the way you structure your room, whether it's a physical classroom or the virtual learning space, I mean, it communicates to them a sense of being welcome, a sense of being encouraged, a sense of being valued, that can really help to undo some of the damage that may have been done in earlier, in previous experiences. So I taught middle school and high school, and so I had learners come into my classroom who had a variety of prior experiences, not always positive ones. So I wanted them to come in feeling like this was a space they wanted to be in. So that was a big thought in how I constructed that learning environment and how I conducted the learning.
And I just want to say also, when we think about physical spaces, we have to realize, just like what Joel said, our students come in with different ways of inhabiting their bodies, and we need to honor that. I have a child with multiple disabilities where if you were to look at her, she needs to rock a lot, right? That's just what she does. So to be aware that how we may situate spaces in the classroom is not the same as theirs, and that our focus in learning mathematics is not about controlling the body or the mind, right? So providing students even that sense of option in where to sit and where they want to be, like Joel wanting to be in the closet, that maybe sometimes our students have sensory overload. Sometimes I have sensory overload.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and I just, this little very short story where I got a chance to go visit my son when he was in 4th grade. And I remember seeing him in the classroom, and he was like perched on his chair like a bird. And like I'm just sitting there because I knew his teacher was amazing, and I just wanted to. And I see him like he's like standing on his chair. I can't do it because I'll fall off the stool. But he's perched like a bird, and I just like, oh my gosh, sit down. I'm like sit down, come on. Like, one, you're gonna fall, but then I look, and like it wasn't bothering her. And he was focused. And then I looked around the room, and there's people sitting on the floor. There's a kid even walking around, but I could see like they were all engaged, and she was like giving instructions for what the task was. And then she's going to turn them loose. And like, it was like, get comfortable and just do. And it was like, for me, it was like, oh, I get it. Like, it was like, I mean, it was like one of those like aha moments, but it was like, there's my kid perched like a bird, but like, she's like, I guess he works best that way. And so there he goes. And so it was just one of those aha moments that was like, why can't we normalize just how you work? How do you work best? And it's just like, we already do that as adults. And like, why do we have to, give kids special permission? And I see Michelle Lowe said we should normalize sitting on the floor for secondary students too. Yes, there we go. We need to do that if you want to. So anything else from chapter 1 before we move on? I don't want to give enough time to talk about our discourse rich environment as well. I bet you Ava's got a good question here to start off. I know she does.
I just noticed that I had to plug my power into my computer.
Oh, whoa, there we go.
So, discourse. Can you talk a little bit, when you say discourse rich, what you mean by that?
Do I go? I always feel like I don't want to be always the one that goes first. I have very strong feelings about discourse when it comes to math, I'll be honest with you. I feel that much of the ways in which we engage in mathematics is very heavily focused on verbal and written ways. And that we talk about math talks, which is lovely. But what we know is that if it's only in talk or it's only written, are we really engaging in the mathematics or capturing or assessing the mathematics? Or are we assessing students' preference in communication and their language abilities? So we use the term discourse because it builds from the perspective that it means for students to be, math is a part of you, that math is not just verbal. We talk a lot about tools. We talk a lot about each other as tools, that it can be written. And as my teachers that I work so closely with and learn from, it's always this idea that whenever to know math, you know it across representations. Okay? It's not a privileging that abstract equations are more advanced than being able to draw it. I think of chapter 2 in that story of what's valued, how Richard had missed every problem because it was a standard algorithm that was memorized. But when you asked him to directly model what the problem was doing, he was able to do it. So was it that he wasn't capable? He was actually brilliant because he knows he can reason abstractively and quantitatively, SMP2. But the standard algorithm that we force upon children, that's a written form of mathematics, is that really what mathematical discourse means? So this is why we use the term discourse. It means that it's across mathematical representations, and that it is not saying one is more advanced or privileged than the other. It is not a linear hierarchical perspective. Math is embodied and interwoven and interconnected.
Guess I'll go. So we're all working on our wait time, but I guess for those that I'm going to plug the book, just the different. I mean, the episode that Cathery just the little vignette that there you go, that Cathery just talked about with what's valued with Richard, fourth grade student story, that was a good one. But also the peek inside the classroom where you're getting on the next page, on page 21, talk about Jennifer Lawyer's fourth grade class and like the discussion that's happening there, and seeing like, what does this look like, where this is not just, we're just not just talking about, hey, yeah, you should have a discourse rich environment. Sorry, my dog is going crazy right now, but can't hear that, but like, somebody answer the door. But seeing like, what does this stuff actually look like with real students interacting and real teachers interacting, and like you get to see what it looks like in practice. And it's just, I don't know, like, was it difficult to narrow down the examples? Because I'm guessing you must have had a number of things. Like, how did you go about selecting? I guess that's what just would make me crazy, like thinking like what to include. And so I don't know anything in that process of selecting some of these things, because this is a cool example.
I think that was the beauty of it. We got to work with so many different teachers, and I think all of us weren't just working at a university, but really positioned ourselves in classrooms every day. So, it was a lot of back and forth discussions on, what are really good examples for us to include to be able to highlight some of the ideas in the book. So some of the ideas came from, the teachers, and we were able to, model that from the teachers. And part of the examples, I think, were helpful to model some of the ideas that we were sharing. But I personally try to position myself to learn something from students every day. And so every day I come home, my partner in life is like, okay, I know you have really great stories today, and as I work with teachers, I think it's always about trying to figure out what can we learn from students to help us, grow as educators. And when we had, at least for me, in helping to write this book, I had that position when I went into classrooms. What can I learn, and try to get better at maybe jotting those things down so we don't forget the details of it, because I feel like I grow as an educator every day being able to go in and see those things too.
And in building from Carolee, so much of research tells teachers what to do. This book was driven by the fact that teachers should tell us what to write. And that research, I put the bracket around the word search, because I think sometimes we need to search more closely for the brilliance that's already in the classroom. So we were blessed with, that's why it took us 3 years to write the book, because we spent a lot of time in classrooms. And there was a lot of, Joel, I'm honored that you can see our intentionality. We were very intentional to capture classrooms in urban, suburban, inclusive, and bilingual settings. It wasn't a book about a bilingual ed book. You will notice that there are like vignettes and examples in Spanish, right? Mm-hmm. And that we're also intentional in covering across areas of mathematics, that we would have examples in early childhood. We would have examples in upper elementary. And we would also capture content that teachers and children found challenging. So there's a lot around fraction understanding, subtraction, right? So how do you develop fact fluency? So there were intentionality in choosing vignettes and examples so that the book doesn't just talk about, it wasn't just talking about creating a rich learning environment. It was also supporting us to unlearn and relearn the mathematics.
Yeah, I want to chime in there. So I totally what Cathery was saying about learning from the teachers, right? We were there to not only get ideas to inform some of the chapters, but also to learn from the teachers. What does this look like in practice, and what are the things they're doing to develop the kinds of discourse communities that the research says are so important? And so one of the things that was so incredible is just all the variety of strategies that teachers have to help students to learn. We talk about in this chapter, you have to be intentional about teaching norms and routines, right? It's not just, okay, sit and talk to each other. Well, you tell a couple young kids to go sit and talk to each other, sure, they'll sit and talk about anything, or they just won't say a word, right? What does that mean? So it has to be modeled. It has to be intentionally help them to see what that looks like. So one of the teachers that I think it was Cathery, who had been in her classroom and recorded it, had students that she filmed, and she used their video in her next year at the launch of the school year to say, let's look at what they're doing. What do you think they were doing that was productive? What do you think we can learn from this? And in fact, I want to show you this. We have the I don't know, can you see it? But in the appendix is a list of the more for you. This was one of the things that I think we kind of threw NCTM for a little bit of a loop initially, because we had so many materials that were not just like handouts, but there were video clips, multimedia kinds of things. And I don't know that other books prior to that had done so much of it, but they were good about it. I mean, they definitely made it work. But so in the more for you are these video clips that you can actually see. You can go into the classroom with us and see what we saw and really learn, not just from what's printed on the page, but really how it's enacted.
Yeah, I kept noticing those more for you. I'm like, all right, this is all sorts of good stuff here. And I like what you said, Mark, like with the, supporting, teachers doing this, but also supporting, like, I mean, we were talking discourse, like with students doing it with students, and looking at on page 27, you have this table that I think is just gold. It's, again, another orange juice concentrate example of the move or habit that we're trying to encourage. The talk moves to support discourse. So if we want to revoice, repeat, and like it's like sentence starters and things like that, but then explanation and use like that table is beautiful. As someone like, I need encouragement on how to do this. And even if, like, I've been saying to my pre-service teachers, if you need some of these sentence starters or things like, how do I get students to talk to students about their thinking? Okay, well, it's okay. Like I might need this sort of support of saying, here's the start to the conversation. Here's the start where I could say, ooh, that was interesting. I could just respond like I see it in Ms. Lawler's lawyer's that transcript. Like there's so many places where, I would have jumped in like, and this is how you should think about it versus no, she's like, oh, you need more time to think. Oh, what do you think about this? I mean, like so many times where it's back and forth of students talking about other students thinking, whereas this is the kind of support that we need in order to do that, get into that powerful mathematics. Right. And so again, I'm thankful for this sort of support for that work that can happen in the classroom. It's beautiful. More for us. Yeah, and Mandy Jan said, this book is a perfect book for a methods course. So if you need to adopt something for the spring semester or fall, put in your orders.
I was also appreciating how much is in this book, but how digestible it is as a read. It's not like a research article, difficult read that you have to slug through. You can read it. It's accessible, but there's a lot of ideas in there. So that also makes it incredibly amazing.
That's because my then 10-year-old, now 13, and I did the final edits, and in our vocabulary, that's just the level. That's how I read and speak. So that's where. And Mark and Carolee wrote it. It would be like the whole, they did the final edits. It'd be that the whole other level.
No, I think that there's so many articles out there that have really important ideas to share that are really difficult to read. And so this was really important for me, at least as one of the three, to think about how do we make this accessible in a way that doesn't seem so abstract, that seems doable, that seems like I could read this without having to, have 3 cups of coffee in my system already. Because we were learning from and with teachers, and I think that this is a teacher book, and ideally maybe even like my then 13-year-old was picking up the book and reading it sometimes too, so and she could make sense of it, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like you, Mom, or hey, Cathery, yay, Mark. So it was important for me that it was accessible for a lot of readers.
And just have to give a shout out that Carolee's oldest turns 21 tomorrow. And in that we need to have a separate session around Carolee's facial products and how she because she was aging backwards. That's another session. She needs to share her beauty regime on,
You don't see the gray hairs that are forming everywhere.
And I think what I loved about us starting with Mark, Carolee, and I together is the relationship of writing the book really embodies what we wanted the book to be. We talked a lot, and the heart of it all was really around honoring teachers and students. There's too much out there, I feel like right now, that thinks that teachers and children don't know enough. And I argue that teachers and children know too much. And I think what Joel said earlier, teachers and children don't need to be empowered. They already have power. We just need to not take it away. So I love seeing the chats and the comments, because that's what we need to do more of as a teaching and education community. How can we keep and maintain the power and honor the power that our teachers and our students have, and the agency they have, and what they know best, right? So that we can learn and unlearn together.
And I know next week we're going to talk, next week we're going to talk about the a task-rich environment. Been thinking about how to put that into play. And when I look on page 26, people are talking about the approachable nature of this book and thinking of that framework, that routines and habits to support mathematical discourse. It almost reads like that could be like a lesson plan, and then we put in a rich task, and now here's the way that we can attack it if we've never done that sort of type of teaching before. Which, I mean, I remember when I read, I was handed Magdalene Lampert's Teaching with Problems and the Problems with Teaching, and what I thought was so powerful about that was you got to see inside of what a really good teacher does, and the thinking that they're doing and the interactions that they're having with students. And that was from, one teacher, but like now you're getting a number of teachers here. Like, this is really powerful, and seeing like, how do we make this approachable? And because if I'm starting off in one place and I want to get to this place, you've given the stair steps to get there. And that's pretty good. And then also all the children's work examples, which are neat to go along with it, to see like what is the work that might go along with doing this sort of having this sort of engagement within the classroom. I feel like every time I stop time, it's like, and that's pretty cool. Like Chris Farley in that SNL piece, like, and this was awesome. That was awesome too. So, but we have about 4 minutes left, and I don't know if there's anything from these first 3 chapters that you're like, hey, this is really important, and this is an aha that we want to leave with. I don't know if Ava, you had another question out there, or Mark, Cathery, or Carolee, did you have anything that you wanted to make sure got out there before we, because we're having some really good engagement within the chat with people talking with each other. I love it.
Yeah, in the chat, I was wondering if 1, 2, or 3 of our authors could address that. And I'm trying to, here. How do you deal with the perspective that the traditional algorithm is the best? You see that all the time from parents on social media. People put down of teaching kids different methods. How would you all respond to that?
Good one.
I actually say the standard algorithm isn't bad. I think it's it's not a good or bad. I think there's a misconception that the standard algorithm is so bad and we really want them to go a really long route, right? I go from the perspective of, I often use the standard algorithm of fraction division, 3 divided by 1/3, right? And they tell me what to do. Then I say, close your eyes. Can you give me a real life context for what you did right there? Like, when would you actually do that? And then when grownups can't tell me, then I'll say, well, or kids can't tell me, like, well, that just made math feel kind of pointless, huh? Instead of saying, if I had one of my students has bunnies and 3 pounds of rabbit food, and that rabbit eats a lot of food, 1/3 of a pound a day, how many days would it last, right? Like, if we gave it context, or 3 chocolate bars, then a child can solve it. So there's nothing wrong with the algorithm. And what does it mean by traditional algorithm? Traditional for who? Like, for whom? Because traditional algorithms carries its, I go back to chapter 2, what Carolee had written about, what Carolee wrote that part. What is valued?
Right.
Within the traditional algorithm, or just algorithms, who is valued? And then to maybe have families come in, like what Mark will talk about and what's in chapter 5, around having families come in and share their traditional algorithms. Traditional algorithm isn't bad, but it's traditional algorithm for whom, and how is it connected to the world around us, and we make sense of it.
And are you going to add something, Carolee?
I see you ready to talk, so you go first.
So I agree with that. I also want to say that, in the service of what, right? We're going to have them learn a traditional algorithm for what? Well, in the early 1900s, when some of the traditional algorithms that in the United States are familiar to us, it was important to have a compact, efficient written algorithm, because paper was scarce and we had no computers other than humans doing computation. Were our computers, right? So in the 21st century, we carry around devices that do literally over 1 million calculations a second. So it's not about doing quick calculation. It should be about, how is this helping us better understand the mathematics? and use mathematics in the service of some, making sense of solving a problem, of posing meaningful questions, of analyzing something. So a traditional algorithm can help to do that, but not in and of itself isolated from any sense making.
I think teachers who've grown up in this country have only experienced the standard algorithm and only experienced red marks on a page in terms of feedback on their thinking. And what I really try to get or to understand and help or engage in conversation with other teachers about is how do we develop that understanding before the traditional or the standard algorithm comes into play. Because by the time kids have graduated from high school, we've asked them to memorize over 1,000 different things in math, and often they're disconnected. So how are these ideas coherent? How are they making sense before they get to the standard algorithm? I think that there are some students who can use it with understanding, and then there's some students who use it and get incorrect answers and have no idea that that answer isn't reasonable at all for the task that they just solved for. So I think it's a development and a progression, and going back to Common Core with the equal intensity between conceptual understanding, problem solving, and procedure. I think that is one way to help teachers think about how do we create multiple kinds of experiences for students that aren't just focused on that like procedural skill and doing it quickly. And not that it's bad. I just want some understanding with it first.
Well, this was awesome. We've been on for an hour, and I want to honor everyone's time. And this is fantastic. And it's just the beginning of the NoGuilt Book Club for reimagining the mathematics classroom. I'm so excited to continue it. So excited to continue reading. And again, if this is you don't have the book and you can just join for these, or just gonna join when you can, that's awesome. We just want to have a lot of fun learning from each other and learning with each other. So that's great. So thanks to Cathery, Mark, and Carolee for writing this book and joining us this evening. Thank you all. Thanks to all of you out there for joining this first book chat of the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast NoGuilt Book Club. And if you are enjoying this conversation, you haven't yet, hey, please subscribe to the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast. Shameless plug. We'll have an episode toward the end of December that will wrap up all these discussions. And you can join us next week where we're at same time, same day, Thursday at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 5:30 Mountain, and 4:30 Pacific, where we will discuss Chapter 3, the task-rich environment, and Chapter 4, the assessment-rich environment. So good night, everybody.
Good night.